resume the recording for those who cannot make it at the current time. My name is Avital Percher, and I am the Director of Partnerships for the National Science Policy Network. And I help organize, along with Aaron Conrado and Annabelle, the monthly webinar series, as well as the diversity program. So this is our monthly one. You're here for the Go Far, Go Together. Can everybody see the screen, by the way? Yes, great. Lovely, all the yeses. If you're covering this on Twitter, please feel free to use the hashtag SciPolWebinars. So who is organizing this webinar? As I just mentioned, it's several of the folks over at NSPN, but this is a collaboration. This is a collaboration with the Engaging Scientists and Engineers in Policy group, ESEP Coalition, as many of you have probably heard or attended one of their happy hours throughout the country. So you can find this webinar recording of this and previous webinars we've done together with them on our YouTube channel. Now, we have, we are encountering a slight technical difficulty with our moderator, so I'm just going to kick us off straight into it. We have panelists here with a third trying to join in as well. We have Sam Anderson, who is also our Central Hub co-chair and a leader from the group for Catalyst for Science Policy at Madison, as well as Willie Mata from the UC Riverside Center for Science Policy. Yusuf, can you hear us? Heyo.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Fantastic. Quick, you're on the spotlight. Introduce yourself.
Okay, I am Lisbeth Finseth. So I am from the University of Colorado, the Ian Schutz Medical Campus, and I run a group called Project Bridge here. Anything else?
Nope, that about sums it up. Cool. So I just want to, let's get the conversation started. This monthly webinar is focused on how to get a group started. And for me, I think one of the most critical points and something that I encounter often when talking with different groups about how they want to get started off, and they come and they tell me, Avital, I want to start something, or Avital, we want to start something, and we are unsure how to go from there. And for me, my first go-to comment is let the community know, and let them find out who else is interested. So I'd be interested in your experiences and how you went about engaging interest when trying to start something up at your university.
Do you have someone you want to start, Avital, or can any of us?
Since you spoke first, William, you're good to go.
All right, so I can't give as much insight into how to start a science policy group since I'm the third generation, I guess, of leader in our group here at UC Riverside. But from what I understand about our history, two graduate students at our campus, Drew Story and Holly Mayton, who some of you may know from NSPN, reached out to a professor, Susan Hackwood, and asked, hey, we want to start something with science policy. We want to get involved with legislatures and understand how we can make a difference. And from there, they set up a convocation. They got a little bit of funding. And now, I think a year and a half later, we are working with all the different colleges and deans at UC Riverside to get graduate students training on how to be involved as a science policy advocate or advisor. So like Avital said, they kind of just wanted to do this, reached out to some people, and then there was interest from other students.
I can go next because my story is a little bit different than yours. So Project Bridge actually started at Johns Hopkins with some students that were really passionate about science communication. And they actually this year at SFN just got the Next Generation Award for their work. But they were actually institutionalized within Johns Hopkins. And so somebody from Johns Hopkins finished their graduate degree there and then actually brought Project Bridge to University of Colorado as a postdoc and actually started the group here, but very differently because the Ian Schutz campus that I'm at is actually much smaller. and filled with a lot of medical and dental students. So our graduate program is actually relatively small. So what she did is she actually ended up finding very similar people, like postdocs and graduate students. There weren't a lot of them. There were maybe 3 or 4 people that were just as excited as her about science communication and science policy, and one of them was me. And we kind of formed the group that way and had very little, I would say, administrative support for our ambitions. So we've really relied on graduate students that are excited to do particular projects within our group, rather than kind of working through an administration per se. It's definitely more so like through our own will and our own time. Well, everybody's time, but yeah.
So like William, I didn't found CaSP, but I would say I'm the 2nd generation of presidents, and so we're on our 3rd or 4th, however you want to count it now. And so when our group started, it was 3 or 4 students, graduate students from one particular department who all knew each other and really interested in the same thing. And they were all trying to pursue jobs in science policy. And so they needed to find a way to do professional development. So they formed this group, and it took, it was really interesting because I was very hesitant to try to join a group. I think I was in my 2nd year, about to do prelims. And the way they got me to start showing up to meetings was more or less badgering me with emails. I'd say I got an email every other week for like 4 months to show up to their leadership meetings rather than just their events. And so, and then when I got there, they're like, after 3 meetings, like, do you want to be president? I was like, okay. So that's kind of how our group started, because they were all graduating at the time and trying to find jobs. So it moved over very quickly to a new set of students.
Yeah, to jump in there, to follow up on what Sam said, when I said I'm the 3rd generation of leadership, that's a 3rd generation within, I think, 12 months of when I started in the leadership role. So it's always a struggle, and like gauging and inspiring interest often is filling in for that founder of your program who's graduating less than a year after it started.
Great. I'm going to jump in, and since this is a first closing round for questions, I will introduce Derrick Carter-House, who is over at UCR, the Center for Science Policy as well, and our moderator for today. I will also point out that there is a question and answer functionality. So if you would like to answer anything, if you can put it in the Q&A part, the panelists can answer while others are talking, and you can have a whole queue up for any questions that people might have. So Derrick, take it away.
Cool. Sorry about that. I was having a hard time getting in, but yeah, I was the 2nd generation for the Science to Policy group at UCR, and have been involved with the National Science Policy Network for a while now, and I'm currently the chair of the Graduate Education Committee. And so I guess I'll just kind of say, since I'm moderating, I want to make sure that everything that we say and do is something that's applicable and useful. So I guess just keep in the back of your head that, you know, this is information for other people. And so just bear that in mind as you're giving tidbits of advice and things. It'll be useful. Okay, so it sounds like you have gone over the first topic, gauging interest, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, so there was a few more things, such as how do you then go on to gain the support of the administration and the leadership at the university. And so maybe we can just start with Lisbeth. Could you talk a little bit about how closely tied in you are and like the different opportunities that I know that you've had in the last couple of months as you start to maybe start a fellowship program and tie in deeper and deeper with the university? How did that work?
Well, it was definitely a struggle actually right off the bat, because we are University of Colorado, but we're a section of University of Colorado. So it's kind of plays to smaller universities and a lot of the struggles they have. We don't have a lot of resources for the graduate students, particularly in like career development already on campus. So it was definitely a push. I'm a badger. So I would say I really had to annoy the government relations team that we do have quite a lot, actually, to kind of get to where we are. So we recently threw a summit for Colorado, and we brought a bunch of Coloradans or early career scientists from Colorado into one room and brought state legislators to our campus to talk about what they think about science policy integration. And also one of our Congresswoman Diana DeGette, also came over, which was really great. But the thing that really got our government relations team's attention and the chancellor and the deans to actually pay attention to us was this event was saying, giving letters to legislators and basically saying, we're going to talk to them with or without your approval. And so they kind of had to go along with us. And that's kind of how we've really gotten administrative support, really, is just kind of asking for forgiveness later, actually. So yeah, it's a little bit rocky, and we're pretty lucky also to have, so our career development office actually is one person for like thousands of people. He's a great person, but he's kind of our main advisor. And so we're pretty lucky to have him on our side and to kind of help us work around the ropes of our administration. So figuring out how to appeal to our chancellor's interests and our president's interests of our university and what their goals are strategically for the year, and figuring out how we can align with them to show that supporting this type of initiative is actually really important. So that has been pretty key in our success lately.
Okay, so your government relations, the people that tie the university to policymakers are important. Do any of the other panelists have suggestions for how to get the investment of the university or the institute you work for?
So I can jump in and say it's really been a challenge. So when I first started off, there was very little that we connected with our university. We had a faculty advisor for our student organization, and that person was incommunicado. They never responded to anything or answered. And when we really were able to get off the ground was when we found an advocate in higher, not at the faculty level, but just slightly higher, like department levels. And fortunately for us, at the time, we were trying to really not get off the ground, but really start taking off, I guess. Same thing, different meanings. Was when Jo Handelsman ended up becoming a faculty at our university. And so she formerly worked at Obama's Office of Science and Technology Policy. So she came to work here, and we automatically saw the connection that was going to be so useful. And so once we found a faculty advocate, you really only need to find one, preferably that has tenure already. And then they were really able to key us into the higher up resources that were necessary, where we could find funds and where we could find different opportunities for grants. So I really recommend, for those of you trying to tie in with your universities, to find a faculty advocate, because students and postdocs can only do so much. And while I'm here, I'd like to answer one of these questions by Shruti about postdocs. And so the question is, like most policy groups and departments, are about grad students, and on the face level, it's really true, and it depends on how much you, what the ratio of participants or like of people in your university are, how many of the grad students, how many postdocs. And so CaSP in particular is very interested in postdocs. And so I would say half of our leadership is postdocs and half are graduate students. And the way you really find, I guess if you're a grad student looking to reach out to postdocs, the best way to do that is through a postdoc association or various people in your department. I find that postdocs are much more dispersed in their little islands as opposed to graduate students. I think it is important to engage them because they have useful knowledge, but it is a little bit more difficult.
Okay, thank you. William, I was wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit about other routes. So government relations is one thing, but we work with multiple areas at the university level. I don't know if you want to talk about a little bit who else is important, or how we work with other groups to make things happen, events and so on.
Yeah, I can definitely talk about sort of a more integrated approach to working with university leadership. So we have a bit of funding that we use to run our program, and that has enabled us to do a lot of really cool things. So we actually have really worked closely with our university deans, specifically of our graduate division, and that has enabled us to host a 10-week certificate class offered through our group to teach students how to learn science policy skills in the vein of a miniature CCST or AAAS style fellowship training. And we also asked deans for funding for events that are meant to engage both their student population and students who are interested in science policy. So some things like this that we've done have been a policy hackathon where we were funded by various departments on campus and various institutes in order to get students to research a topic from a policy perspective in order to create a memo. We also have been working pretty closely with our university advancement office. So depending on how your university is set up, you could call it university fundraising. And these are the groups that are reaching out to foundations and private donors who may be interested in funding groups like us or NSPN or anyone who's interested in science policy. So this has been another way that we engage with the university other than government relations. Does that answer your question, Derrick?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to make sure we kind of covered that there's a lot of ways to get support from your university. And if somebody says no, find somebody else that says yes, yeah?
Yeah, and then Derrick, there was a good question from Caitlin Higgins that I wanted to try and answer live really fast, since this is sort of tying into getting non-university community invested. So our group has made a pretty large effort to try and go visit all of our local legislative offices with graduate students, tell them about what we're doing on campus, invite them to all of our events, and then get those offices to support the work you're doing, because they love seeing students being involved, and they like the opportunity that graduate students can sort of inform the topics that those offices are working on with their expertise, because graduate students are experts in their respective fields.
I'd like to add on to that, even furthermore, those people that reach out to you from the community that you start to build bridges with, they often don't have the scientific expertise that this network and pool of people do. And so if you offer them the opportunity to do work for them or advise or consult, it often allows your small group to get a foothold, which kind of answers Catherine Lopez's question about maybe not in the first year, but being able to pick up a pet project with somebody who can help you is something that's very useful for getting your group established.
Can I also add on to that I'll agree with both those statements. For us, it's definitely been about like going to talk to our legislators and particularly their staff and really getting to know their staff members. And from building those relationships and saying that we can offer them information on particular things, like really showing that we can be a resource for them in some manner or form has definitely solidified a lot of those relationships and it's built a lot of trust. So now we can go to certain legislators and say, we would love to do this with you. Could you help us train some graduate students? Or would you like to come into the lab and see some really cool basic science that we do? So that's definitely helped.
Yeah, I think anytime that you can offer a resource that someone else couldn't get otherwise, a non-academic person or a university affiliate, that's when you can really sell yourself to the community. Anything else on that? So Caitlin wants to know, well, yeah, let's quickly do this and then I'll save Catherine's question for the last 15 minutes. So Lisbeth, do you want to talk a little bit about how you maintain those relationships as people phase out, move on?
Relationships with legislators, is that the question?
Yeah.
So I would definitely say groups, making sure that these groups are sustainable is really, really difficult. And, you know, like graduate students and postdocs, we are fluid. We are in fluid positions. We're not stable. And and legislators are not stable either. So sometimes if a legislator moves on, for instance, one of our contacts is running for Senate. So like he was a representative in the state. And so if he goes and wins Senate, then like he will probably be out of touch then. Like, and we'll be able to talk to him still, but he won't be the contact that will be as accessible, right? So it is definitely a constant thing that you have to learn to do, right? So not being afraid to email a legislator 3 or 4 times before they respond, which, you know, feels odd, but you get used to it. And, you know, always trying to make sure that you have action items with these people, because nobody likes to go have a meeting just to have a meeting, right? Like, yes, you can go talk about your interests and that's great, but it means a lot more if you can walk in and say, I have these things that I'd love to do with you, and then follow up on those items and figure out where you can progress from where you started, right? So for instance, we had the summit with a few legislators coming to campus. We already got the Congresswoman Diana DeGette to come back to campus for lab tours already within a month. And then with 2 other legislators that are some of the state representatives, we're already planning a day at the Capitol with them so that we can continue involvement and continue engagement with these 2, because they are also head of the Joint Budget Committee, which means they have all of the money in the state. So they're nice people to know. So always making sure that you can have action items and build on those action items that's been really crucial for maintaining relationships.
Okay, great. I think I'm gonna move us along here, but kind of tying that in with the next question about, you know, how do you structure your groups? What are the leadership roles? You could also use that leadership structure to keep your relationships maintained. So make sure that the old leader is introducing the new leaders to the legislator or the handy people to know on campus or off campus. And so I guess your prompt for this question, tell me about quickly your leadership structure, and then what are some advantages, or a advantage and a disadvantage for that setup. Yeah. William, do you want to start, or Sam? I don't care.
Yeah, I can start. So we probably have a more centralized version of leadership structure than a lot of groups do, I would guess. So we have a director and associate director. Our director is a faculty member, and our associate director is a former staffer at various government entities throughout his career. Then they primarily provide guidance, insight, help us build connections to legislators and other policy experts. And then the people who do most of our work are our student cabinet. So we have a cabinet consisting of 7 people, an executive chair, which is my position, a vice chair, our education and events committee chair, our content creation chair, our external affairs chair, our internal affairs chair, and a government relations chair. And then each of those 5 chairs runs a committee of 2 to 4 students. So all of our events and other things are planned through them. And then other students who are interested in what we do at UC Riverside are a part of the Science Policy Graduate Student Association. And then students are committed to a little more weekly time or investment in the program are spending more hours with us. And then our government relations chair, to tie into that last question, is someone who's continually reintroduced to local offices by the past government relations chair. So that's how we sort of maintain that institutionalized relationship with legislators.
Yeah, I can talk about that next. I'm sorry on the chat to Nick Young. I didn't know that when I made a sarcastic comment, it was going to get rid of your question in the open questions about certificate courses, but maybe William can answer that while I'm talking. So CaSP leadership structure has really changed over the last 4 or 5 years that I've been here. So when I started, it was a equal footing group of 4 people, and then 2016 happened, and we had a giant influx of people that wanted to join our group. And so we created a leadership structure in order to accommodate what people wanted to do and the manpower that we had. And so I actually made a giant list of things that I think were important for this stage, but our leadership structure itself, we have 2 co-presidents, and they serve 2-year terms, overlapping 1 year with each other. So at any one point, there's always somebody who has had at least a 1 year of experience as president. Below that, we have treasurer. We changed our secretary to operations director, because they do a lot more than secretary stuff. Treasurer, operations director, and me, and I exist currently as the national liaison, working with NSPN and other groups around the country. And then below that level, we have several committees that change as needed. We have a professional development, communications, who handle like all of our Twitter and blog and everything. Outreach, policy engagement, which is a really fun one that if we have a chance, I'd like to talk about. And then we just instituted a diversity committee, which is still getting off the ground. And so some of the things that I think are really important to sustain a group like this is to create a very low engagement bar for people to get involved and get a title and give them titles that they want. People like titles. And so it doesn't hurt your student organization at all to make somebody a professional development chair. I mean, in essence, it helps you because you can advertise more. And I think it's also really important to find leaders who will work with you, but who complement your skills rather than replicate what you already do. And so, for example, I'm a very detail-oriented person. I have a lot of I make sure everything's in order and make sure things are organized. And the person who came after me, Caitlin, on the call, she is much more interested in doing big things and thinking of big ideas. And so you need both types of things to make an organization work. I think it's important that your leadership structure has a diversity like that.
I would agree with that completely. So for us at Project Bridge, so we started at about in like late 2016, 2017. So we're a pretty new group. So what we have is, so I'm the president of Project Bridge, and then we have a vice president and a government relations chair. And then we also have like a financial committee and a science communication committee, and then a legislative engagement committee as well. People love titles. That is like, if you say you're going to give somebody a title, they will do anything for you. It's great. Yeah, and so I would really agree with Sam's statement in that finding somebody that complements you really works. So I am not detail oriented. I love big picture stuff, and I am terrible at sitting down and writing something. And like, I need to vocalize whatever I'm thinking or talking about. I'm that person. And my vice president is actually somebody who's very introspective and can really sit down and think through all of these ideas and come up with something that's just really cohesive and really reflects what I want to do, but in a way that we can actually execute. He'll also write all of my emails for me, which is really great, to make sure that, you know, I don't like misspell a word or something. So definitely finding people that complement you really, really helps, because they can do things that are really going to stress you out, that maybe you just don't have time to have that stress, and they can perform that for you, and it's going to make your life a lot easier. Yeah.
So I think Caitlin has a really good question here. Speaking of Manpower,
Sorry, I just typed an answer right when you were about to get that, but we can definitely talk about it live also. It's a great question.
I think we hit on a couple of things during this question that kind of speaks to that. Manpower, you get people titles, but you also get people who are passionate, who want to do things, and then you let them do what they want. So you have committees structured around dynamic committees, yeah? And then I think there was something that Lisbeth said, but I can't remember what it was, just to kind of answer Caitlin's question. Okay. One thing that I think a lot of people here are interested in would be what are some short-term goals or things that they can do that are easy wins, low-hanging fruit, things like that, for maybe the first year of your organization? What are things that you did, or some things that you wish that you had done?
I would say first, honestly, just get people to your capital and get them adjusted to talking to legislators, because that in of itself can be really intimidating. So, you know, I mean, legislators talk to their constituents all the time. So if you have the opportunity, or if you're close to your capital, just going over to your capital and meeting with somebody, you know, just once, just to get exposed to it, it's a lot easier than most people think. Or, you know, figuring out how to email or call your representative on a particular topic that you are interested in. I think that's a pretty low-hanging fruit, that it doesn't need a lot of manpower. It just needs some people that are kind of really excited about talking to their legislator, and then kind of just doing it, really.
I mean, I appreciate that, Elizabeth. I would actually disagree, though. I think the idea of contacting a legislator, at least from our group standpoint, it was a really high bar. I don't think we even got to that point until year 3 or so. And that, I think it's because, like you said, people are intimidated by that. And so we started a lot smaller than that. And And I think the most important part of your first year is finding interest, is finding people interested in the same thing as you. But before you do that, you need to find out what is your vision, right? Like, what is it that you want this student group to do? And so in our case, before I started, their goal was professional development. It's expanded since then, but professional development for people who are interested in science policy. And that was sufficient for me to start getting involved. And so when you're starting a group, just figure out what your short-term small goal is, and then just push that and push to find other people around campus who are interested.
Yeah, I think I would agree both with what Elizabeth said. Meeting a legislator can be great, and maybe focusing on meeting the ones closest to your campus and their district offices might be a lower bar for entry, depending on how your legislature and the structure is set up. Events that I think would be really good for new groups include just talking about the structure of your state and the federal legislature, how you can testify as an expert witness as a scientist, what it means to be an effective science communicator in a policy setting versus just being a science communicator in general. You can utilize a lot of university resources for this, including your university's communications department. You can talk to professors on your campus who are already effective science communicators. You can try and find individuals in the local community who are starting science action groups and then reaching out to established organizations. And I know our group is very happy to share information on how to run some of our simpler events, like how to set up an elevator pitch, how to write science policy op-eds, things like that. So utilize existing resources is probably the easiest way to host events that you may not be able to do on your own.
Yeah, so I'll just put a shameless plug in. The Graduate Education Committee is right now in the process of collecting all of the hard work done by other science policy groups and creating kind of a national curated set of activities and things. And we are ranking those on the amount of involvement or work they are to accomplish or to learn. And so once that's done, the National Science Policy Network will have a great resource. And if you're interested, you are welcome to join the committee and help us scour for more activities and create this resource. Let me see here. Let's go ahead and do one last question. So if you had $1 million or $1 billion, money wasn't an issue, and you had all the time and people in the world, what are some of the long-term goals of your organization? What do you envision your group doing in 5 years or whatever?
Well, we recently, I don't know how recently, maybe 6 months ago, had a discussion about what it is that our long-term goals are, because we've achieved a lot of our short-term goals, and the symposium that just happened was one of those that was really important to us. And so I think some of the things that CaSP is really looking to do is to follow suit of some other groups and try to institute a PhD minor on campus that is science policy. There currently is a science communication one, there's quantitative biology, there's a whole bunch of minors that you can add to your PhD. And so I think we're going to try to do that, or not we, I'll be done with them, but some other people are. And we're also thinking about starting to advocate for the state level policy fellowship, and like UVA is, and a lot of other groups. And so we're thinking about jumping off of that and using those as our two big institutional projects that are coming in the future.
We also have a few institutional goals because, like we are all doing this in our free time of trying to promote science communication and science policy and advocacy. So trying to make this so that we have better institutional support is a huge goal of Project Bridges. So we're trying to figure out a way that we can actually form an office on campus for shoots so that we can coordinate more opportunities. To align with that, we're also trying to implement some state policy fellowships for graduate students so they can actually go for a few months to the Capitol, work with a legislator, figure out what it means to be in government, and bring their skills and expertise to government, and just kind of expose them a little bit to policy.
Yeah, so our group is working on a few different long-term goals. One is to become an endowed research center through the UC system. So this would require us to be recognized by both our university's academic senate and the University of California Office of the President. This would sort of give us some long-term established standing, and we would be able to hire a faculty position who would be our director of the program. This would help us to run a fellowship program, which Derrick actually piloted this last summer for the first time in a congressman's office, to work on a project with them using their data analysis and research expertise. And we also are working to actually pay the leadership of our student cabinet to be graduate student researchers in the center. So they would be working on projects for us, and then also to be connecting their research deeper into policy areas in their time. So instead of having to teach or do something else, this would be their paid work at the university.
Okay, great. These are awesome long-term goals. So with that, I think we can open it up to a question and answer. Holly Mayton had a couple. So Avital, will you open up the discussion for other people to speak, or are we going to do this just via the chat?
More than happy to allow it for people to speak. Let's see if we should have a raise hands functionality, if I am not mistaken, and I can check the panelists of do people have any questions that they want to ask. Does anybody want to raise a hand?
Did you guys want to answer Holly's question about biggest challenges before we get into other Q&A stuff?
Let's do that first. So biggest challenge, I think that's actually two questions. So I'd be curious to hear what all of you feel was the biggest challenge you faced and the lesson you learned during your tenure as leaders for science policy groups. So maybe if one of you has something really good about a challenge, and then another could talk about a lesson that they learned in their leadership role.
I have a pretty good challenge one that we just got through. So our group got really ambitious recently, and we hosted 5 events in 1 month, including 2 pretty unique things, which was a mock legislative hearing, and then we also planned a workshop for the NSPN annual symposium. We also had a couple other smaller workshops on campus, and we also hosted a policy hackathon. So we struggled a lot to really budget our time and balance what graduate students are doing with their research and their actual work with then how many events we planned so close to one another. So this ties into the lesson, and we learned we really need to balance our calendar better and think about how we're scheduling and planning events rather than just having them when they pop up and there's an opportunity to do that.
Can I add on to that?
Sure.
So I would say that is like the biggest challenge, is trying to balance your time on top of everything that you're required to do for your science, then also trying to do something for science policy is a really big challenge. So learning where you can put your focus and time and energy, and when you can't put your time and focus and energy to that spot, I think that's a really important lesson to learn. And for like Project Bridge for us personally, so because I'm a part of NSPN and like I co-lead the Western Hub, I get to see all the amazing things that California does. Like you guys do so many awesome things in science policy with your group, and like CaSP does too. And that actually for me can be very intimidating because I have quite a few less individuals than these other more established groups have. So I've learned after being a part of NSPN that I actually can't really compare Project Bridge and what Project Bridge does to a lot of these other bigger groups, and realizing what we can actually have done and where our focus can be, and when we actually can't do as much as some of these other groups. So kind of learning to not compare Project Bridge to these more developed groups has actually been a huge lesson that I've learned.
Great. Sam, do you have anything?
There's so many things, but I guess one of the biggest lessons I've learned is how to take advantage of the resources around you, and to, I mean, I guess in a similar vein as the previous two speakers, but to really know when and how to let go. And so I wrote in the chat somewhere that I think it's really important for people in charge of the organization to step down before they graduate, before they leave the university, because that you don't want to just up and leave and then that source of knowledge is gone. And so I think it's important for people to start farming out the resources and identifying what your colleagues are good at. And one of our favorite words in CaSP is being voluntelling them to do things for us. And so knowing your limits is one thing, but also knowing how to expand while not overcommitting yourself was a really interesting lesson, and being able to identify people's strengths and take them there.
Yeah, like Sam said, that voluntarily stepping down, there's been a few questions about passing on leadership practices. So one thing that I've started, and I think Derrick started before me, is just writing down the ways to do your different events and how to get a hold of your university administration, who's helpful, who's not. So the next leader doesn't have to learn all that again for themselves, and just saving it in some type of archive and updating it as needed as forms and other bureaucratic things change at your university, and just making sure that's an available resource for your members.
Yeah, so I think Holly's other question kind of hit on something important, and that is money. How do you get money? I think, Sam, if you could maybe talk a little bit about getting money for events, and I'm thinking like the National Science Policy Network Symposium, and then maybe William, maybe you could talk a little bit about how we go about getting money to fund students and fund projects and ideas. And Lisbeth, I don't know if you want to offer any expertise.
So the National Science Symposium, Policy Network Symposium, was an enormous undertaking. And so I'm going to start before that and talk about how we raised money before. And we really just asked. You'd be astonished by how many people give you money if you just ask for it. And so by that, I'm talking about random department chairs who you have members of your group in that department. Your depending on how big your university is, your whole university student council has money. Different graduate programs. We're having this event. We think your students would be interested in it. Will you be willing to give us $200 to buy some cookies for the event and have people show up? And so a lot of times the funding in the beginning stages was give us a couple $100s for food, because that's how you get people to show up to stuff, at least graduate students anyway. As we move towards bigger things, you need to have bigger ideas. And so having an event about, what a AAAS fellowship is great, but it's only applicable to so many people. And so when you want to host large events with important speakers or something, people are more likely to give you money if there's a wider audience for that thing. And so for the symposium, we advertised at the time hoping 400 people would show up. I think we ended up at 250 or 300. But when you have that large of an event, people higher up in the university are interested. We asked for money from various industry sponsors, from research institutes. Other people can talk more about this because I wasn't super involved. But as long as you have a really good idea, or not, honestly, it doesn't even have to be that good of an idea. You have to be someone who's good at pitching. And so you need somebody like Lisbeth to go and talk to people and convince them that your idea is great. And then maybe you need somebody like me on the back end actually making it work. And so, like I said, diversifying strengths is really important for this fundraising effort.
Great. William, do you want to quickly talk about how we talk to individuals or for foundations to get money to fund the program?
Yeah, so we are kind of continuing the process of working with university fundraisers to look at foundation calls for proposals. So whenever these come up, we work with our director and the university to submit and ask for money for our center. So this can be for operational funds or for like a specific student project. We also work with groups and private individuals to ask for money, and that's how we got our original operating funds. We are working with government agencies and their partners to fund graduate student fellows in offices. And then we also are working with our university administration to talk to our board of trustees and the university donors who may be interested in funding our groups. And I mentioned it in the question to Holly that she asked in the Q&A, but the way you frame your ask for money, and like what Sam mentioned, it greatly changes the answers you're going to get. So you need to target the individuals who are interested in getting scientists involved in policy or using science to influence the government. And there's like ways that you can frame your asks to make them even more interested in what your group is doing on a campus. And then definitely I put in the chat, but send questions and I can talk more in detail about the ways we do this with you off of this webinar.
Lisbeth, do you have any tips or tricks behind selling your events or group?
I was just going to say that I would love to talk to Sam and Will about fundraising more. The majority of our fundraising that we've done so far has really been within the departments. They've been a really great support system for us. And so we're currently really trying to figure out how we can sell our ideas and our events to like higher ups in the administration, and like talking to like our chancellor and president and whoever else is important or has any money to give us. Yeah, we're kind of really in the early stages of figuring out how to do that really effectively. So.
Okay. Are there any other quick questions and answers? Otherwise, I'm going to thank the panelists for their time and sharing their expertise and opinions. And I think Avital has a few slides to wrap up.
Great. Thanks everybody for sticking through. Thank you all the panelists and Derrick for moderating a wonderful conversation. Always really, really fun to hear all the different perspectives and approaches that people have took. I just wanted to follow up with some additional information that we have about our programs. And should anyone be interested in hearing of more ways to get involved with NSPN, as well as ESEP, if you're hearing and learning a little bit more about engaging scientists and engineers in policy, you can sign up. You can sign up as a group or as an individual, and you get put on their mailing list, and they notify about a variety of really great events, and they're also active on Twitter. If you are intrigued by all the conversations we've had today, you're more than welcome to join our community. You can sign up at the National Science Policy Network .hiveprite.com, or just go to scipolnetwork.org and it will redirect you. And for some stuff that we do in terms of investment in the community. So this past November, we launched a professional development fund that is intended to invest in our members and help them participate in different communities beyond their research. So if you have any interest in specific training or attending any symposium that isn't specific to your research areas, hit us up. You can apply. The first round is on December 1st. Sorry, I was blocking it with a chat. And this is an absolutely wonderful opportunity to expose yourself and introduce oneself to a new network. I strongly recommend it. If your nascent and budding group is interested in trying to tackle on a project and you're looking for some additional funding, we have several times a year the NSPN microgrant program, where we provide seed microgrants of $1,000 to $3,000 to groups. And this is open to our chapters. We usually give around, I think, over $10,000 per round. So there definitely is funds to go around. So you can find out more information on our previous microgrant and keep your eyes open and ears pricked for the upcoming one. And finally, we have, if you are looking for something, if your group is looking for something small to get a taste of the water of what it is that we do in terms of a community, we also have a open science policy memo competition. It's an international competition open to member groups, both from the NSPN as well as internationally, worldwide. And this can be either on a science and top policy topic relevant into the US or one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. There is more than a long period of time. The deadline is April 1st. And we have a plethora of resources online stemming from a workshop we hosted last year. As well, it includes recordings and guides and so on and so forth. And that is our last slide. Thank you everybody for coming. Feel free to follow up to us with questions later on. And we'll be jumping back into our webinar likely in January. So stay tuned for that. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, Avital.